Hey guys, I got Mario Odyssey a few days early, so I'm gonna do a video on it today. I've not finished it. Full disclosure here. Not finished it. Pretty close, I believe, but I've got all my thoughts together. The reviews are out. I need to get something out. But I do actually have criticisms of this game that appears to just be getting perfect scores basically everywhere. 98 average is insane. It means it's got more 10s than it has 9s, which is kind of mind-blowing. I knew it was going to be good. It's a Mario game, especially a 3D Mario game. Nintendo usually do a damn good job with those. They put a lot of polish and sheen on them, much like they do with their Zelda titles. But this good? Guess we'll find out. I'll tell you what I think. So first I'd like to start this with the fact that there's no microtransactions, there's no loot boxes. I mean, you wouldn't really expect so from Nintendo, but this is just a single player, optional co-op, single player primarily, video game with a ton of content, no DLC I believe, and it's fantastic. It's just fantastic to see that that's still alive and well in both this and Wolfenstein 2 that released today as well. And look where it gets you, it gets you 9s and 10s. Shadow of War got pretty damn good reviews, and of course I'm sure it's going to sell a lot, but it didn't get the critical acclaim that something like this has got, because with this, it doesn't feel businessy, it doesn't feel like a cash grab, it feels like heart and soul went into making this. And I think that's a really important thing to note before we dive in. So one of the first things that obviously you can see effort went into is just how it looks. It's pretty damn impressive for a Switch, a portable console. Not perfect, and I'm going to start out with the pros and then we'll get into the cons later, including some of the cons on the graphics. Surprisingly good texture work almost all around, especially on the enemies. The character models look fantastic. There's bump mapping, there's all that kind of sheen that you kind of want nowadays. The metal looks like kind of scuffed up, and that's not really been seen in any other Mario games. Usually it's just very bold, and like a Bullet Bill for example is just black, you know, all around. Maybe it has a little bit of shading, but in this it has like scuff marks and various other things that just give it that extra bit of kind of depth and texture. And the same goes for Mario, of course. His bounciness everywhere, like his nose and his mustache has more details. Unfortunately, his nipples don't bounce though. That's incredibly disappointing. They are only dots, which is, it's kind of a shame. I wanted a little more bump mapping on those nipples, but everything else is pretty damn good. Goombas, like I said, just all enemies, all characters really look absolutely fantastic. And while the residents of a place like New Donk City, which is the very realistic play on New York City, of course, the character models actually look okay there as well. Very repetitive, you don't see too many variations or anything like that, and they all have the same clothes or whatever. But I mean, it fits in because Mario has a lot of, like, Goombas, you know, all look the same. And the last thing I'll say about the graphics in terms of the pros is that there's just so many little details. There's the aforementioned, like, bounciness of everything, but there's also the fact that Mario might get shot and he'll have, like, gunpowder and smoke on him, or if you roll in the sand, then he'll be covered in sand and that can wash off in the sea, or it just, like, kind of falls off over time. A ton of tiny little details, like Mario just looking at things as he walks by them, which isn't like wholly new, but it's the little things that Nintendo put in there that we've seen in this and we saw in Breath of the Wild earlier this year that really just scream, we loved making this game. Cappy is the most fundamental change to the Mario formula since Flood in Mario Sunshine. And yeah, I love Super Mario Galaxy 1 and even more so 2. I absolutely adore those games, but there wasn't a single thing in it. They had a lot of different things and creativity, especially in the level design, but there wasn't a particular mechanic that was insane about them. Of course, the gravity was the big thing with those, but there wasn't something fundamentally different about Mario himself other than the spin attack, which is great. I love the spin attack, but it's nowhere near as interesting and diverse and has so many uses as something like Cappy. And Cappy's fun. It's a fun little character and makes for a lot of fun interactions with the world. A lot of objects and enemies that can be possessed, and that opens up a load of new gameplay prospects that just weren't available before. Before you were Mario. You might be Mario riding Yoshi, that was also another big change in the past. And then in this, you're Mario with a hat that not only can it do its own ridiculous moves, like being used as a platform to jump off of, used of course to just be thrown at enemies, but then of course to possess them and utilize their different mechanics, and all of them, they don't have the most complex mechanics. You kind of don't want them to because there's so many of them. I think there's 53 or so objects to possess in the entire game, and that's a lot. That's quite significant, and they all feel a little different. There's stuff like poles, which you can like flick Mario off. There's obviously Goombas, which was one of the most interesting things about that, was I was like, why would I want to be a Goomba? Then when you're in ice levels, Goomba's feet, they don't slip everywhere, so that's useful, and then you can stack them. So if you're a Goomba and you jump on another one, then you just keep stacking, and you can stack higher and higher to get to new places, and that ties in with the very heavy exploration of the entire game, as well as allowing for some differences in gameplay. They just allow for easier uses of like traveling around these areas. You've got things like obviously cheeps, which you can possess, and then you don't have to worry about breathing underwater anymore. You can just breathe infinitely and you can swim faster. It's a lot better, and overall the game feels better than any other Mario game to date to play. Even better than something like Galaxy, I think. And it has a few more moves than Galaxy with Cappy, and also rolling and various other like kind of just little moves like the rolling, and then the diving kind of makes a return from Mario 64, because obviously this kind of trying to pay a lot of homage to that game, and it does a good job at it while not leaning too much on it. That's the important thing. But it all feels just slightly different and just tweaked to perfection. Mario actually feels different running up a hill than he does running down it now. And of course the rolling can come into that, the new rolling move, which you can shake your Joy-Cons to get him to roll faster, and that can be kind of a convenient, quick use of travel. Personally, I just kind of stick to the tried and tested long jumping over and over and over, which they've actually linked in. After you long jump, he actually gets a little burst of running speed, which is just really kind of nice. It feels good. It's just, the game feel is fantastic. It is the best to date. He feels solid. He doesn't feel too floaty. He doesn't feel like he's gonna fucking hit the ground way too fast or anything like that. It might take a bit of getting used to, of course, because it's ever so slightly different from those old games, but when you do, it's just like almost any of those other games, just in how great and natural you start to feel with it. I got thrown off quite a bit at first because I didn't have a double jump like I had in A Hat in Time, which I was getting really used to. But then soon enough I was just utilizing Cappy to get around all of these tricky platforms and into little nooks and crannies of the environment, and it felt really good at getting to places that I didn't think I would be able to, or I kind of felt as though I was tricking the game in a way, like breaking it, which I also felt in Galaxy a few times, because there were a few little shortcuts that you could do there, but for this it's almost encouraged because there's so much exploration, and it's actually more helpful because getting the moons, which are the stars of this game, getting to them usually requires a lot of exploration and discovering secrets and getting into these nooks and crannies of each environment, and to do that more efficiently just feels fantastic. There were times where I didn't think this exploration was necessarily going to work so well. When I saw the desert, even in the trailers, but especially in the overview when you just arrive at it, I'm like, this is huge, this is a little too big to just traverse, right? And then suddenly you have the Jaxi system, and that actually solves basically every problem. It's a ridiculously fast tiger thing, Jaguar, is that the idea? Is it supposed to be like a Jaguar taxi? Maybe. It's weird. But it works really well, and it means that you can get around that huge environment incredibly fast. And while it's not the easiest to control, that's part of the challenge and links into some of the challenges that you'll actually face with it. And I just think it's fantastic that they thought of that, much like they thought of the cheeps, and then there was another kind of sea urchin thing that blasts out water in a later world that makes traversing over the water and through it just a joy. It feels so good to do, and you can tell they've really thought about how you would get around the environment and how to keep that interesting and fun for a prolonged period of time, and they've done a great job of that. You have checkpoints as always, but they're also warp points now, so they're even more important and significant. Not only do you respawn from them, but you can travel to them at any time, which is great if you see or you know that there's a moon in a certain place and it's actually on the other side of the world. Then you can just teleport there, and the loading is so fast, it's so good. You have like 5 seconds of loading to get into the game, and then after that all the loading is insanely quick. There's even a few bits where you will find something in one world that will transport you to another, and you just go to the next one within a matter of seconds. It's so fast to load up, which was really surprising. I didn't expect that for the Switch. I know the game cartridge makes it faster anyway, just having it on a cart instead of a disc, but it was still really impressive because these worlds are kind of huge, especially ones like the desert and New Donk City that have, I think the desert has 69 moons, haha, and then New Donk City has like 65. It's a lot, it's a significant amount, and how they're able to get away with having so many moons is that a lot of them are just kind of there. They're just they might be hidden in the environment, others are pretty obvious. Like I said, they're just kind of there as you're making your way through the level, because you have story-based moons essentially, so you have kind of a linear progression of missions to get you used to the new world. It's usually about 2 to 4 or so missions that will get you a bunch of moons in and of themselves, and then you can just explore. I mean, you can explore even during those missions as much as you want. There are certain things that the mission might restrict you. Like in the desert, a lot of it is frozen at first, and then you have to complete some of the main missions to obviously melt the ice, and that gives you access to even more areas, which is a great way of encouraging re-exploration and you to come back. And a lot of the time when you come back, it's not just those places that were shut off before that you'll find have new moons. You'll see something that you missed before, because there's so much to do and there's so much to miss. Moons and coins are the primary collectibles in each level. You have like normal coins as well, but these coins are the purple ones and they're finite, just like the moons. So you'll have a list, maybe about 50 coins and then about 60 moons or whatever, and those are your primary collectibles. Though that's your incentive to explore as much of the place as possible. And sure, if you don't really want to do that, then you can just move on to the next world. A lot of the time I had Cappy being like, hey, we have enough moons to move on to the next world. I'm like, no, I'm good. I want to stay here for a little bit. Kind of like how I had with Galaxy, and I'm sure many people had with 64 and Sunshine, where you have enough shines or stars or whatever to move on to the next area, and you're like, no, but I'm not done with this one yet. And this carries that on. But the important thing to note with this is that when you find a moon, you don't get kicked out of the level. That's something I adore, because it just enhances the exploratory feel of it, because it doesn't restrict you. Because while I think it's a system that works quite well, at times proved that it can still work quite well, the whole idea of choosing a specific mission to go and get that star or whatever the main collectible is, and then sometimes you have to choose a specific mission because the other star or collectible is only available in that certain one, is a little just kind of annoying for me. I like just being thrown into the world and knowing that everything is just there. I'm not missing something because I'm not in the correct level select or whatever of the world. And I think that really encouraged me to want to explore, because there's a lot of times in like 64 or Sunshine, it was like, I don't really care about any of the secret shines or anything like that, because I don't even know if I'm in the right level. If I looked it up online, then sure. If I really want to get 100%. Fun fact is that Super Mario Galaxy was the first game I ever 100%ed, and then I did it again with Galaxy 2. When I say 100%ed, I mean all 120 as Mario and then all 120 as Luigi, and then that last one that you can get with both of them once you've got the 120. And that's how much I loved those games. And I might be doing it again with Odyssey here, because it's just that fun. And because there's like over 500, maybe even over 800 moons in this game, you're not going to be short on them for the most part. Like I said, there's a lot that are easy to find, but there's even more that are well hidden, and they're probably the most satisfying ones to find. The ones that are just kind of strewn throughout there feel as though they're there just so people can get to the end of the game without being challenged too much, and I didn't find the game as a huge challenge. You don't have lives, which I'm grateful for, because I think lives are a really outdated system, and I'm glad that Nintendo realizes that. But you only lose 10 coins, and I thought that wasn't really much of a punishment, because coins are given to you with like basically everything, and the normal coins, not the purple coins, and you can use them to buy the various outfits that Mario can wear throughout the game, and that's a great use for them. You can also use them to buy moons as well. There's usually 1 moon per shop in each world, and only losing 10 of these doesn't really do much. I thought that it might have been you lose 10, and then if you die again on the same part, like say you die again within the next 10 minutes, then you lose 20, and then you lose 30 if you keep dying on the same bit. Something to punish people a little more would have been actually kind of appreciated. So I think the challenge could have been increased in that way. I think there could have been more challenges earlier on. I probably played it for 20 plus hours at the moment, and I've only found a few parts that were truly challenging. There are segments where you'd find a secret, and then it'd be kind of like the challenges in Super Mario Sunshine that were also kind of brought into A Hat in Time as well. And they're really fun. I love it whenever I find an area like that, because I'm like, sweet, an actual kind of platforming challenge. Usually not too difficult, but it's something that's a little more engaging than most of the other stuff that is in the overworld, because a lot of it is just based on exploration rather than a platforming challenge. And if you prefer that to a platforming challenge, if you just prefer the exploration element, then you'll fucking love it, because there's so much. Like I said, over 500, well over 500 moons. It's an insane amount. You want to complete this game, you're going to be at it for hours upon hours upon hours, and because the game is based around that, it doesn't really feel like filler. Like I said, some of the moons are so easy to find that maybe you could consider them filler, but because they're so quick to get, who cares? It's not like a boring side quest in one of these AAA games nowadays, of like Assassin's Creed or Shadow of War, where that really just does feel like padding. But because the entire game is based around it, and the mechanics make it feel so fun to just do the act of exploring, it feels great constantly, all the time. And if you're struggling to find moons like I was on quite a few of these, then there's a toad in each world who will actually give you hints. He'll actually basically mark down the place on your map where the moon is, but especially on the very vertical levels, that doesn't always just give it away. Sometimes it does, but not always, and that's what's really nice about it. It's just saying, it's here. The moon is here, but you still have to do whatever it is to bring it out. Whether it be like a ground pound, or solve a mini puzzle, interact with something or someone. And that's fantastic, because it keeps you in the game. You're not going online to find a guide, because they realize, oh, they'll just do that anyway. So why not put it in the game? And for 50 coins, which is a great use for them. See what I mean though? You only lose a fifth of that when you die. But for 50 coins, you can find out a location. And it just means that you're still playing the game, and you don't really feel like you're cheating too much. At least I never did, especially when it got to a certain point. I was like, fuck this. And then there's also a Talkatoo, I think it's called, a Talkatoo, that will give hints. It will basically give the name of whatever moon it is, and that in itself will be a hint as to how to get it. It won't say anything, it won't mark anything on the map. It will just give you the name, and that ensures that some moons are really secretive and really hidden, and you might have to end up going online, or hey, just play the game. I know it's kind of a cliche to bring it up at this point, but the fact that this is on the Switch and is portable means that you can just come back and do a little extra exploration, maybe get a couple of moons here and there, because you're not having to dedicate yourself necessarily to an entire mission of getting a moon. You can just go explore, get one, get two, put it down, come back to it later. Because I can just pick it up whenever I want, I feel less inclined to go online, because I never think, oh great, I have to do this now. I'm sat down, you know how it can be when you're playing it. I'm sat down, I am playing this game, I'm not letting this time go to waste, I need to do something, right? But for this, I can put it down, I can pick it up. You can go and see my video on the Switch bringing back the fun to hear more about that whole concept, and why that's so important to me with the Switch. But either way, I think it's a huge benefit for this game in particular. And there's just so many surprises, there's so many little things and then some big things that happen that just plastered a giant fucking smile on my face. It's just so fun, it's just so joyous. Like most Mario games, sure, but it's something that you didn't really get in New Super Mario Bros, especially New Super Mario Bros. Like 2 and U, and the consecutive ones that just kept coming out, and maybe they'd have like a little thing in there. But in this, it's just one after another of just something interesting, something exciting, something fun to either look at, jump across, or like possess. And that's what makes me want to go back to it right now. I don't want to be recording this, I want to be playing more Mario Odyssey. Why wouldn't I? It's just such a fun world to get lost in and explore. Because I was never actually a huge fan of games like 64 and Sunshine, especially 64. 64 DS I enjoyed a little more, probably also because that was portable. However, I just thought the worlds were a little bland. I mean, obviously because of the restrictions at the time, and now this can be far more interesting just visually, but because of all the things that I've just mentioned, all the little tweaks to ensure that exploration isn't interrupted, I'm now having a lot of fun with this style of Mario game that I just really didn't in the past, and that's a huge accomplishment for Mario Odyssey. I thought I was going to like it. Everybody was freaking out about how this is like a Super Mario 64 style game. I was like, kind of prefer the Galaxy games. But no, they've refined that concept to a T, and it's just so fun. Now let's get onto some of my criticisms about the game, because I do have them. They exist. I know it's shocking that a game that's so highly rated can actually have flaws. One of them is actually to do with the controls. It's not huge, but there are certain moves, like with Cappy, if you want to throw him up or down, or do like a spin thing where he just spins around in a circle, you actually have to move the Joy-Cons like that, or like that, or like that. It's motion controls, and I'm fine with motion controls. What I'm not hugely okay with is me not being able to use any of those moves in handheld mode. If you've got the Switch on the go, you're not going to be fucking moving the entire console, are you, to do these moves? You're just not. And there are plenty of circumstances when you're possessing something which it will say, shake the Joy-Con to do this, which is usually either do a thing faster, which usually isn't all that necessary, so that's fine, or jump higher. So there was a time I had in handheld mode and I was playing as a Goomba and I needed to do some bigger jumps, so I need to shake the entire system to do that. So if you're taking it with you, it's probably better to play in tabletop mode than full-on handheld mode, and that's kind of a shame. There are buttons that just aren't really being used that could be used. That's my main problem with it, is that it could be used, but it's not. And I don't know why. I'm really confused as to why ZL and ZR have to be the same. Because in all the tutorials it says press ZL to do this, like crouch or whatever, start roll, like it's ZL and then Y to start rolling as you've been running. And I just tend to use ZR because it's what I'm more comfortable with, but that shows that they're used for the same thing. So why can't we have at least an option to use one for something else? And one of the main problems I found this in, that I would have really appreciated an option like that, was just swimming as Mario. I wanted to get Cheep as fast as possible, because obviously then I don't have to worry about my breath, but also because I didn't have to worry about the fast swimming thing. Because to do like a really fast swim, you have to hit ZL or ZR and Y precisely at the right time. It's not so bad for stuff like rolling or doing the dive, because it's usually ZR and then Y right after it. And you can almost do them together, you can get the timing like right on, so it's just one after the other within like a millisecond, microsecond even. But this, it has to be at the same time, and it's really unreliable. Plenty of times I just would have either dove down, or because it detected the Y, it would have thrown Cappy instead of doing fucking fast swimming, and just made swimming more frustrating than it should have been. And it's the fact that there's a solution right there, and for some reason Nintendo they're all about the simplicity. But ironically, it seems to have made the controls a little more complex because there's so many button combinations. There's also just a certain point in each world where I just kind of lose interest. It's not immediately after all the story-based missions that guide your hand a little more. I usually kind of give it the once over, see how many secrets I can find, and then after that I'm like, okay, and now it's time to move on. But fortunately, there's always something else to move on to that's just as fun for another good, 5 hours or so. Although it varies from world to world. Like the desert world, I spent ages in that. It must have been 4 or 5 hours at least. And then I got into the next world, which I believe was like a sea, like some sort of water world. And that I drifted off from pretty quickly. I'm not sure if it's just because it was water or I just couldn't find as many things, but it just didn't grab me like the last one did. Maybe it's because things were just harder to find and I suck. So more of a personal thing there, but still worth mentioning. And going all the way back to graphics, while Mario Odyssey looks pretty damn good, especially for a portable game, the draw distance is awful. There's plenty of times where enemies will just fade out and you have no idea that they're there. But they fade in when you need to know that they're there. And all the vital landmarks are always there. So it can be a land way off in the distance and it will still be there. Maybe something on it won't be there for you to see, but as long as it is there, because it is the thing that you need to go to anyway, it's the thing that will hint that, hey, there's probably a moon here. And as long as those are there, then it's fine. It's really noticeable, especially because the draw distance really isn't that far at all, but not the end of the world. Shadows are also pretty poor for the most part. Even at like a minor distance, they get significantly worse. And then animations at a distance are noticeably Dark Soulsy. I say Dark Soulsy because it's the first time I actually ever noticed this kind of technique being used was in Dark Souls, because it had a problem like this as well, where if you were far enough away from an enemy and you were looking at them, then their animations noticeably like lower frame rate. They were very like kind of jittery, and it's especially noticeable in New Donk City, where they want to render all of these people, but because the Switch can't handle that at the highest frame rate, they need to be rendered and they look pretty bad. Again though, it's all worth it for this 60 FPS. It's 60 FPS, guys. For something with such huge worlds on such a tiny system, it's still incredibly impressive. It has a dynamic resolution as well. I never really noticed it all that much, and it's just going to be pretty hard going back to a game like Sunshine, which was actually 30 FPS, after playing Mario Odyssey, because it's just so smooth that there's very, very minor frame rate dips, but it's usually to, I think, like maybe 55 is the worst. Nothing that even comes close to dampening the experience. It's that good. And finally, the worlds just aren't the most inspired. They're neat, the level design itself is fantastic, and a lot of the things within them are pretty great and inspired, especially like the enemies and the idea of possessing them and the abilities that they have. But the worlds themselves, prehistoric is sure, but I mean, it's just still another grassy kind of world. Desert is desert, water is water, ice is ice, etc. There are a few more interesting ones than that I won't spoil, but for the most part, they're not incredible. Especially after playing A Hat in Time, which I know I do keep bringing up, but it's because it's another one of the best like 3D platformers of the year, and another collectathon, much in the same vein as this. But A Hat in Time's second world actually impressed me more than anything in here, which is kind of insane for an indie game to be able to do. But its second world was just so inspired compared to a lot of the Mario Odyssey stuff, because it was this movie set where two factions were trying to make a movie. Like, I think it was owls and penguins. They were both trying to make a movie. Like, what, this entire world is just a movie set, like a background, like you're going behind the scenes on these sets and then kind of like avoiding cameras and stuff like that. And maybe A Hat in Time doesn't feel as good to play, but goddamn if that wasn't really just kind of a fun, interesting concept, which I never truly got from Mario Odyssey. You could argue that New Donk City is quite interesting and inspired, just because of how much it clashes with Mario, and it was kind of daring to do something like that. It looks kind of ugly with some of the repetitive textures, but it's charming in its own weird way, and that's what's really nice about most of Mario Odyssey, in fact, is that it is charming in its own weird Nintendo way. And they've gotten even weirder with this, it feels, because of the possession and just everything having mustaches and caps on. And it's fun. It's just so goddamn fun. So sure, I prefer the more punchy, focused levels of the Galaxy games. Galaxy 2 might still be my favourite even compared to this, we'll see. But there's no doubt that this was the console to bring this sort of game back on. No doubt in my mind, and Nintendo have done a fantastic job at bringing it back. So if you love hunting around for secrets, getting 100%, finding all of these collectibles, then this game is definitely for you. But hey, if you love to just have a damn fun time, get the game. It's really fun. 98 average. 98 average. There's not much more that can be said. It's one of my favourites of the year, and I'm going to give it a solid 8 to a light 9. That might change once I've tried to get 100%. Maybe it'll be suddenly a 10 out of nowhere. But for now, it's a solid 8. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.